Chemtrails are real, and it's something that you should be fighting.
What is it? Why is it being allowed, and who's doing it?
They've destroyed the marine layer with the spraying.
You see them up there, you know it's happening, and you didn't consent to it, and it's changing weather patterns.
If you can weaponize the environment, you can use that to great military advantage.
How can the public demand answers?
Toxic material in the atmosphere is not a very good stewardship of the earth.
Increasing fires and harming farmland, making our people sick.
Shut down the programs, stop the spraying. Secondly, the people who have been doing it need to be punished.
Welcome to Back to the People podcast, which highlights the growth of a movement uniting America, where our government is free from corporate capture and where we give voice back to the American public. Peter Kirby, thanks so much for joining me here today on Back to the People podcast. We have been looking for the foremost expert in geoengineering, and the street word for it is chemtrails. I mean, that's what we talk about it in terms of when we see these tracks in the sky. It's we all talk about, I mean, everybody talks about it. I'm a surfer, especially in the surfing community. Surfers all over the world are seeing these things. They see how it changes the weather, how it results in clouds coming in within, a few hours. There's been seasons that they've noticed used to be sunny, and now seemingly you wake up in the morning, you see the tracks in the sky. Within a few hours, it's all cloudy. And people are frustrated because you go on the internet, you try to find information about it. It's oftentimes framed as a conspiracy theory. But we all know, look, we're sitting here in Silicon Valley. We all know geoengineering is being invested in widely, especially in this area. Geoengineering is a part of portfolios of venture capitalists and philanthropists, government as well. And so I think it's, I think what you've done is, and I really admire the amount of time and the years you've dedicated to this, and also the backlash that you've received from dedicating your life to this work. It is probably one of the biggest issues that is not being discussed properly, is weather modification. So, Peter, tell me, what is the number one message you like to open with to people who know this is happening, are frustrated it's not being discussed, want informed consent? What's kind of the opening message you lead with to folks like that? Because that's our viewers.
Chemtrails are real. This is the thing that you need to understand. This is the thing that I've been trying to impress upon the general public all this time. And I think that's the most important thing, just trying to show people the reality of these programs, because if you simply realize that this is taking place, then you should also know that it's completely unacceptable, and it's something that you should be fighting.
The details on what is being sprayed up there and by whom are very hard to get. And that is where you've invested your time and energy. What is it? Why is it being allowed, and who's doing it? So maybe we start with the first question. What in the world is in some of these cocktails? And it's changed. I mean, based on reading your book, Exposing Chemtrails, the particulates that they're spraying, the aerosols, up above us, and usually over coastlines, because precipitation's a big part of what they look for when they do this. What are they spraying on us?
Most commonly, it has been scientifically determined that what we're being sprayed with is something known as coal fly ash. This is the work of Dr. James Marvin Herndon, who I've worked with quite a bit. He has worked with me on that presentation, the Attack on Food and Farmers symposium. We were part of that. RFK was part of that as well, James Corbett. And the second day it went me, James, Marvin Herndon, and my other cohort, Ginny Silcox. That was an hour-long video that I put together. I basically produced the video. I was kind of like the host. And then it went to James Corbett. I think he went on for about a half hour, and then it was RFK's. But they're spraying. Dr. Herndon has had a long series of peer-reviewed, published journal articles where he goes over the scientific evidence for the fact that we are being sprayed with coal fly ash, because he is taking environmental samples, not only from rainwater and I think maybe some ambient air samples as well as soil samples and other environmental samples. And he keeps on finding this chemical signature of coal fly ash. Now, what is coal fly ash? I didn't know what that was when I first heard of it. It is the ash that rises from burning coal. Mm-hmm. And this is a toxic waste byproduct of the coal-fired power plant industry. And this coal fly ash is collected at these power plants because, when you see a electrical power plant these days in America, at least, they don't have these things in China. That's why the air is so polluted. But in America and in the Western world, they have these devices attached to coal-fired power plants called electrostatic precipitators. And these things have been in place for many years now, and they collect the coal fly ash. This is why you don't see huge billows of smoke coming out the top of electrical power plants these days. They have electrostatic precipitators that intercept all that particulate matter. And so that means we have a vast, readily available supply of this stuff. And that's what you need when you're talking about a program that's dumping tens of thousands of megatons of material down on us every year. Mm-hmm. So, it wouldn't be feasible in most cases to manufacture something to be sprayed. It would need to be something that there's just simply is an abundance of already that you can just go scoop up and, utilize it. Mm-hmm. So, that's what we're most commonly being sprayed with. But when you look back in the history of these types of operations, spraying things from aircraft, you understand pretty quickly that they've been spraying us with whatever they want, whenever they want, largely since World War II, since the end of World War II, so about 80 years. And the evidence for this is found most readily in a couple of books. One is called Clouds of Secrecy by Dr. Leonard Cole, and the other one is called In the Name of Science by Andrew Golachek. And those are the two books that I reference in my book. There's more evidence for this. There's other sources to find that information, but I think those are the two that are most readily available. So yeah, they're spraying us with coal fly ash. The evidence indicates that. This has been Marvin Herndon's thesis. Marvin Herndon is a world famous PhD scientist, mm-hmm. and he has lots of respect from people all over the world, and he's also a very, very active activist. Yeah. And but they've been spraying us with whatever they want, whenever they want. So not only are they spraying us with the coal fly ash, mm-hmm. They're doing God knows what. Yeah. Dane Wigington from Geoengineeringwatch.org has been saying consistently that the environmental samples that he continues to take have many other things in there besides the coal fly ash. Well, he's not looking for the coal fly ash signature, actually, Dane. He's just looking for things in there. It's more of Marvin Herndon's area of expertise to find a chemical signature of something. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean?
Yeah. And so this has been going on for decades. You said since World War II, and people have so many questions about why there's no consent required or notice to the public. How is that legal? That's oftentimes what I hear is, how is that legal? Where is our consent? We do not consent to this. What the hell are you spraying on us? So we just answered the what piece. But why? Why are you allowed to do this? How are they getting away with this?
They're just doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a whole apparatus behind it that keeps it secret. I do believe that the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, is the day-to-day manager of the entire program. And I make a case for that in my book. One of the final chapters where I'm naming the culprits and why I name these most probable culprits. I'm always sort of operating on the verge of saying something that could be slanderous, or what is it, slander or libel? I forget. There's a difference there, but I try to hedge my bets there. But the CIA owns the mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
They have ever since Operation Mockingbird. So
Yeah, and it's not just in the United States. I've seen them fly over the coast of Mexico. You can see chemtrails in parts of Europe. It's, they publicly do it over in the UAE to help with weather management. So I think all of us are beyond any of this media narrative that it's not happening, and those who claim that it's happening, you're conspiracy theorists. I think that we're at a phase now in the popular conversation about it. It's how can the public get in front of this? How can the public demand answers? How can farmers, you talk about this in your book, how can farmers start defending their land? Because it's raining down onto farmland across the United States, and farmers are reporting these unusual contaminants in their soil and in their water supply. So I think we're now at a phase in the conversation where, we're pulling all of this research out of the dark. We know the mainstream media is lying to us. They're bought. We have an independent media, that's what this is, who's dominating right now. Independent media is the media.
mm-hmm.
I think that's what this last election really proved.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you seeing out there or hearing from farmers? Let's just talk about farmers. I care very deeply about farmers. I care about their sovereignty. I care about the longevity of American farmland. What are you hearing and seeing from farmers? You write about it in your book. Tell us what you found.
They are salting the earth. And it kind of makes me believe that maybe they know that they're on their way out, and this is some kind of temper tantrum where they just say, okay, we're going to leave you with a world that doesn't produce food. Dane Wigington has been talking about, he's seen evidence of reduction in food crops and crops that just will not grow. I mean, not only are they destroying the soil, they're blocking the sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a double whammy. And I would absolutely assume that it's becoming increasingly difficult to impossible to grow food these days. And so this is, threatening the very basis of our survival on this planet. And so, but, I really don't think that it's going to stop until we see a fundamental shift in world power. Because the people who are doing this are absolutely hell-bent on these programs.
They believe, I think the distribution is there's a group of individuals that believe that the climate is under threat. They're starting to sell it to us in the popular media, and that blocking out the sun or managing the weather is our best hope for survival of the species, which you could argue is a noble pursuit. But here's the reality. They've got the science wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They've got the science wrong. For one, weather modification, which we're already doing, you could blame some of these big weather events likely on some of these geoengineering programs that are happening without disclosure. And we've had scientists, which you talk about also in your book, that have been warning about big disruptions that occur when humans begin to manipulate the weather. and we're seeing that. So what are some examples of these storms? You can increase wind, right? Laws of thermodynamics. There's ways to increase the power of wind.
Yeah.
You can, which, has many related challenges and disasters around it. I mean, they were seeding around the LA coast before this last set of fires.
Yes.
And the laws of thermodynamics, if you understand like how displacement works,
yes,
will draw, that energy from cold to hot.
That is probably the one thing that we are sure that they can do. Okay, so they have this whole program where they spray things out of planes and then they hit the particulate matter with electromagnetic energy. That type of operation has all kinds of possibilities. In fact, I believe that using those two things, you can attain comprehensive weather control. You can create any kind of weather that you want. Although they are not disclosing what they're doing, of course, this is a secret program. Just from scientific laws and understanding of how the atmosphere works, we are pretty much 100% sure that they can at least create high pressure zones. Mm-hmm. Because that's pretty simple. What you do is you hit the particulate matter in a certain area with what's known as the resonant frequency, and that heats up the particles. So you create heat in the atmosphere, and that creates a high pressure zone. That's all you have to do. And I mean, and that type of stuff goes back to weather modification experiments that happened like decades ago. So, what if you can create, with doing that, you can create the Santa Ana winds.
Yeah.
You can create a high pressure system inland and a low pressure system just off the coast, and have that air flow from high pressure to low right through the area that you want. Mm-hmm. You can also detonate smart meters strategically. You can apparently cause a smart meter to explode anytime you want. So if you have those Santa Ana winds going and all the other environmental conditions, if you haven't had rain for, almost a year, like they have had in Southern California, everything is so completely dry. You get those Santa Ana winds going, you strategically detonate a few smart meters or maybe a whole bunch of them at the same time, get houses on fire. They were talking about pictures of houses. I haven't seen these yet, but I'm told that pictures of houses exist where there are flames inside of the house.
They're coming from within.
And so, yeah, you detonate those smart meters strategically, catch a whole group of houses on fire, and you're off and running.
What is the genesis of this? Is it, we know, we had Tom O'Neill on the show who wrote Chaos and is one of the leading foremost researchers of the MK Ultra program. We know that the United States government attempted to keep up with developments that were happening in Soviet Union and Russia, or so they claim, around behavioral modification, and therefore the United States had to catch up and invest in these programs here at home. When we think about weather modification, there's really two sides of it. There's the climate side of it, and there's also the military side of it, the national security as well as the weapons portion. Based on your research, is what we're seeing today more of one or the other, or did one evolve into the other?
One evolved into the other. What we're looking at and what goes back into ancient history is geophysical warfare. This has always been a military project. It's always been a dream of military planners to be able to control the weather and to control geophysical conditions. I note in my book that there were instances of ancient armies diverting rivers or causing rivers to rise or fall, and then using that to a military advantage, as well as there was another instance that I stumbled across of someone causing a landslide fall upon their enemy. So, yeah, it's about using your environment. I mean, it's like most people know that weapons are all around you in your environment. You know what I mean? And it's just a matter of picking it up and using it as a weapon. That turns it into a weapon. And so, the environment is the environment. It's all around you. If you can weaponize the environment, you can use that to great military advantage. So I think that, and then there's even things, deeper than that, like people wanting to control the weather for rain. Like American Indians doing rain dances and things, trying to make it rain, mostly in times of drought. That's when people have mostly wanted there to be a change in the weather, when there hasn't been any rain for a long time. Was, we need water. Water is life, right? So yeah, there are these ancient roots of this program and this whole area of study and activity. And then the whole climate thing is really a red herring, if you ask me. They're weather and climate are synonymous. These are two words that are synonymous with each other. And so, but if they went out saying that, like, we're doing a big weather control program, that might raise a lot of red flags with people. They say, no, we want to control the climate. You see, it's more benign. It's long term, and so don't worry about it. It's just climate, but then it's just none of what they say makes any sense. When you really break it down.
Well, yeah, and I came into the climate world because I come from. Yeah, I'm a millennial. I'm 39. So I grew up with Al Gore's and Inconvenient Truth being, the leading focus as a young person. Like as a young person, we are told that you have a duty to prevent climate change. And you need to dedicate your life and your career in some way. It is the most noblest of pursuits to combat climate change. And we're all told climate change is due to global warming that has a direct link to global emissions. And it surrounds, especially if you're here in California, your entire life is oftentimes dictated by the climate change narrative, from the car you drive to the food you eat, to the bag you take to the grocery store, to what you buy at the grocery store. And, I really believed it. I was like, we need to follow our carbon footprint and track it all and reduce it all. And the onus is on the individual. Meanwhile, like Bill Gates has some of the biggest yachts I've ever seen, burns more fuel than almost all humans.
Yeah.
Pretty much all humans.
How many private jets does he own?
He does and eats and builds. I've seen his houses. He does whatever he wants. I mean, this guy is not concerned. And he owns now all the farmland. So not all of it, but he's the largest private, I believe, farmland owner in the United States now.
Yeah.
And, so look, I believed it. I was like, well, what is the most logical thing we can do if we're investors, smart people who care about climate change? And so I put myself in that role about 8 years ago. And based on the totality of my research, I was like, well, the energy stuff, private market for energy, government doesn't need to get involved in energy, nor do philanthropists, because there is a really big market for energy, right? And that will drive innovation. That's how capitalism works. That's how markets work. So I'm not going to worry about that. And then I looked at all the sequestrations, because I believe in the carbon cycle. That is real. You have life is carbon, all life is carbon. Carbon displaced in the atmosphere is, you don't want it you want it in balance, right? That's the goal. So I did the measurements and I looked at all the excess carbon, and I looked at our farmland in America, and I looked at soil as this incredible opportunity to sink carbon. And our soils also happen to be incredibly dead and depleted across the United States. We have 900 million acres of soil. I wrote up the measurements. I said, if we increase soil organic matter by 10%, which is a lot of work to do right now, the average is the soil is like 1% of the growing land in the United States is alive. Soil organic matter in the ground, it's like 1%. There's carbon in the dirt, which makes it alive and able to grow food. So then I looked at that and I said, let's increase it by 10%. And wow, we kind of solve all of these climate change issues. This seems like a great, and we can feed people and it makes sense. And this is actually a market that could use some help. So then I put all of my energy into that. I even was like, working on carbon credits, which I know that you almost canceled.
That was a red flag.
Yeah, that was a red flag for you that I was involved in carbon credits. Fair.
But you ended up realizing that it was a scam.
It is a massive Ponzi scheme, these carbon credits. And they're all for energy. They're not for the farmers. I wanted them to be for the farmers. And every time I went in and tried to make it happen for the farmers, all of the money was like, no, we want it for energy projects. And that to me was a huge red flag.
They're like, no, we have an agenda here. We're not going to actually do something that actually works.
And I realized you almost canceled coming on my podcast because you're like, I don't want to talk to somebody who does the carbon credit Ponzi scheme. Yeah. And I called you immediately and I was like, no, I'm really.
And I thank you for that. I thank you for not abandoning me.
Well, I think,
it's happened before.
I would much rather have someone reach out and say, I don't trust you for this. Can you explain it? Than for somebody who just walks the other way. Because I think that
you have to forgive people. I mean, I haven't been perfect throughout my whole life either. I've done a lot of things that I look back on and said that was wrong. And, you got to be a better person and you start living in truth. And so, I also have read the Bible and I'm a believer in Christ. And, one of the teachings of Christianity is that no matter what somebody has done in the past, if they say that, I was wrong and I'm sorry, you have to forgive them. And, like I say, I'm not perfect. I thought that the theory of man-made global warming was reasonable at first, but I was busy doing other things, everybody has a life, and suddenly all these people on TV are talking about carbon, global warming. It's like you're hitting me over the head with this thing. I'm trying to live my life. But then, I had an opportunity to look into it. And there's a chapter in my book called A Convenient Lie. Yeah. Where it just totally exposes the whole thing. And, it's all from the establishment top down. And it's all about atmospheric CO2.
Well, but even
that's what they're always talking about.
I caught them in a lie even around that, because the folks that were ramming climate change down our throats, not one of them was helping the farmers out. Not one of them was doing the farming thing, which after a complete financial analysis, the cost per metric ton is much more efficient to sequester in soil than it is to do a giant carbon capture farm, right? Where they are trying to do direct air capture. That direct air capture stuff, the price per metric ton is like hundreds of dollars, whereas in farming with the soil, it's like $11.
Well, this is how much sense they make.
They make no sense.
They're making fake trees, constructing fake trees that do the same thing as natural trees. They say, oh, look, we built this tree that turns carbon dioxide into oxygen. And we need, a few billion of these things across the country. It's going to be a great industry for us. It's like, don't actual trees do that already?
Yeah.
I mean, this is how much sense they make. And I'm going to quote Mike Adams again. I remember just recently he had a thing I was listening. He had a really good show. Mike Adams, the health ranger, natural news, all that. Mm-hmm. He says, if you really want to save the environment, you should have gigantic torches of flames all over the country creating as much CO2 as possible, because we're at a historical low for atmospheric CO2, and it's very unhealthy for the planet to not have CO2 in the atmosphere.
Well, that's life. It's part of the carbon cycle. Yeah. You need the drawdown and the pump out, and the drawdown and the pump out.
Yeah, you might as well remove oxygen. You might as well remove oxygen.
Exactly, because what does plant life and the organ, all of the plant life in the world and animal life, we need to move carbon and cycle it through, and plants ingest the CO2.
Yeah.
So, it is literally the most destructive narrative, scientifically ass backwards
Mm-hmm.
narrative
Well,
that there
because
is out there.
yeah,
But that is how I realize that the climate change people were just cronies. And I don't even know if they're human. I mean, like, I'm not going to go there, but like,
no,
there's
I
something
hear you.
very anti-human about
Yeah,
it. Like, you have to
absolutely.
actually hate life
Yeah.
to take that narrative and ram it down everyone's throats and get them to behave against their own biological interest.
Yeah. Well, I think they're Satanists. I think that Satanism is much bigger than most people think. And I mean, something that demonstrates this to me is that you see how after the Democrats, the woke Democrats, were so resoundingly defeated in this last election. I've been around long enough to see. Usually, when a political party gets beaten badly in an election, they all say, "Okay, sorry, we got it wrong." And there's a lot of resignations, and people step down and say, "We got to bring some other people in because obviously the American people are saying they don't want what we're selling. We need somebody else in there." But this time, Trump won the election resoundingly, and all the woke Democrats just keep on saying what they're saying, and they're like, "We're not going anywhere."
Yeah.
Like, see, and that is consistent with the teachings of Satanism. There's a whole aspect of Satanism that's about how you can create a whole world in your head, a whole world of lies, a whole fantasy world that you think is real. And if you think it's real, then it is real. And there's no changing that. You know what I mean? And so that would be consistent with how these woke Democrats have been acting since the election. They're in denial.
They're
They're
godless.
yes, the
Yeah.
whole geoengineering thing is an anti-God agenda. I mean, it requires that somebody not have faith in God, that you will be provided for, and that the earth will continue to be a place of abundance and of faith in Mother Nature.
Well, they claim that's naive, right? And how I'd like to combat that is that it is the curiosity with which we can bring to our relationship with God and nature is unlimited, right? And that is a beautiful curiosity. And when you pair it with belief in God and belief in Jesus, the Messiah, it is unlimited. I mean, it is truly magnificent. The scale by which you can then, provide and have abundance and be in relationship with our environment, to read those subtle cues with our environment. And I think that is very important. And when people say, well, it's naive just to hope that God is going to provide, like, you still have to work the land. And the Bible actually says that. The Bible, it wants humans to work the land to produce food.
Yes,
It is part of our job. It's our
stewards of the land.
stewards, and
I would posit that putting tens of
mandate.
thousands
Yeah.
of megatons of toxic material in the atmosphere every year is not a very good stewardship of the earth.
Let's talk about that. Okay, so let's get back to this theme of they're blocking out the sun, they're spraying toxic materials out, materials that are prevented from actually entering the atmosphere intentionally because we know they make us sick. They take that waste material from coal burning,
Yes.
and then they go and they put it in an aerosol and spray it in the sky.
Yeah.
None of that makes any sense at all.
Well, it makes dollars and cents for the people that are doing it, because if you have all this coal fly ash on your hands, there's all kinds of regulations and stuff. Well, actually, the Obama administration did away with a lot of the regulations regarding the sequester when you try putting coal fly ash away in landfills and things. There were a lot of regulations regarding that, but Marvin Herndon has uncovered some of Obama's orders that caused the coal fly ash regulations, the environmental regulations pertaining to all that to just be done away with.
Well, so we have this toxic material that there are all these rules around for disposing of safely. And now it is a substance that has been identified as being effective in blocking out the sun.
Yeah. Oh, it's analogous. It's analogous to fluoride, because the fluoride that they put in the water, they just call it fluoride. It's another toxic byproduct of industrial activity, mostly the phosphate mining industry, and it would cost a lot of money to dispose of it properly, but instead they put it in our drinking water, and they get paid to do so. You see how sick all this is? And so there's known examples of this type of activity already, at least one with fluoride. I'm sure there's probably
Pesticides
more.
as well. Pesticides and cooking oil. Those all came from post-World War II. They were these excess chemicals lying around from military manufacturing, and they needed new uses for it. So spraying it on our cropland, getting rid of pests, that was one of the uses. And then what was it? Cottonseed oil for cooking. And so they're spraying it in the sky. Let's go back to that. They're spraying it in the sky. And you have a chapter of your book that outlines who the they is. It's various organizations, some of which are private. There's startups, there's philanthropic groups that fund it, and there's government groups. What's kind of the big name that everyone should be aware of operating?
The Central Intelligence Agency.
Okay.
I mean, there's lots of private corporations as well near the top of the list, but if I have to say one that's responsible for it, the Central Intelligence Agency. They, oh gosh, where do I even start with them? Well, I mean, you had John Brennan, former head of the CIA, advocating strongly for spraying us with tens of thousands of megatons of toxic material every year at the Council on Foreign Relations in a famous appearance there. And it just goes on and on from there. I really should have reviewed that section in my book. As you know, there's so much information in my book. I feel like Endo from, what was that movie? One of those action movies. He's forgotten more about giving pain to people than most people will ever know. I've forgotten more about this project than most people will ever know. I mean, I published the book in 2020, but yeah, there's about maybe 20 instances in the book where you can tie the Central Intelligence Agency to things that are going on with chemtrails and geoengineering. For one, there was Dresser Industries. Now, this goes back to the coal fly ash thing. They're one of the big producers of electrostatic precipitators. And Dresser Industries is, it eventually became part of Halliburton. But back in the day, it was acquired by Brown Brothers Harriman, which is the Bush family bank. And everybody knows that the Bush family, is up to their eyeballs in the CIA. I mean, they obviously work for the CIA. And so there's one right there. And then the Operation Mockingbird thing, they've obviously been covering up all this stuff with their mainstream media and ridiculing and trying to beat back the opposition as much as possible. I mean, my work has been severely repressed. As I mentioned on the phone when we were talking, I was getting really good web traffic early on. One of the first things I did was expose the CARB, California Air Resources Board, where they had evidence of scientific evidence of atmospheric aluminum and barium going up and up. And that's kind of what broke me on this whole thing. I published an article about it, and that's what got me going. And then I was publishing other articles after that, and I was getting really good traffic. And so was my web publisher, Activist Post. Michael there, he's not there anymore because Activist Post has now been acquired. But his website and my articles on his website, we were going great guns. I had at one time, if you searched the term New Manhattan Project, which is a term that I have coined in relation to this project. If you search that term, of the 10 search results on the first page, I would have 9 out of 10. I saw that happen quite a bit. And then one day I searched the term and I'm like on the 4th page and there's like one listing all of a sudden, and so obviously the CIA owned Google, who got their start with In-Q-Tel funding from the CIA. They obviously diminished my search results and put a squash on it, put the kibosh on it, as they say. And then there are other examples of like my articles having thousands of shares or thousands of likes on Facebook, and then hundreds of tweets at the bottom of it and stuff. There were like a little register at the bottom of the article, shows you how many likes and shares and tweets and stuff that you had. And then one day I checked back on it, and all of a sudden I got like 25 shares and 5 tweets. So it's like, where did all those other tweets and likes and shares and things go? I mean, they just disappeared all of a sudden. I mean, so they're running operations to suppress all this information, and they've done a very good job.
Yeah, and it would have to be a confidential government program in order for them to continue to get away with it, as they have been. If it were just strictly a private company up there spraying.
It's probably a rogue group that actually splintered off of the CIA. And I think that this rogue group that calls themselves the CIA was a George Bush invention. It was like the George Bush CIA. There's multiple CIAs really. If you, in my estimation, you're looking at not just one group that's even remotely accountable to the American taxpayer. You're looking at groups that call themselves the CIA and just have no accountability whatsoever.
Well, and they have contracts. So if you're a government contractor, you are not required to disclose or disseminate information. In fact, you are kind of doubly protected because other government agencies can't necessarily demand information from you. Only your direct contract provider typically can demand the delivery of information. I was talking to a friend at NASA who went through a very interesting situation with a government contractor where he was trying to access data that was being collected through a program from not his department, but a different department, but it was all under NASA. It was all under the same agency. And he wasn't able to access that data, even though that department was involved in the research. And so just imagine how big of a hornet's nest that can get when you have now multiple departments at multiple agencies, all kind of operating clandestine.
Mm-hmm.
And
the CIA has great interagency power.
That's correct. Yeah. So they have special powers, the CIA, given the nature of their mandate. But imagine if you're the contractors out floating around. There's thousands and thousands of these government contractors. And they're just banking on these agencies, paying them out for this work. And if those agencies, if there's turnover or, lack of oversight, which we know is happening in instances, like these projects flying over our head, like they are these potentially rogue groups.
Well, yeah, they know no nation. I think they're supranational, and I think they're working with the UN. And I think the UN is up to their eyeballs in this thing as well. If the information is in my book, they have about, I think, 10 or 15 different agencies within the United Nations that are related to weather and climate and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I make all kinds of connections between the UN and all of this stuff.
Have you come across any whistleblowers from within?
Yeah, I haven't been handling them directly. Dane's been handling some whistleblowers. That's kind of a whole nother area. I do more like historical research. That's the hot stuff. You know what I mean? And Dane's more the activist and more of a scientific knowledge of these things and more out beating the bushes. He's done more than anybody in this whole thing. I mean, I feel like I have the story, you know what I mean? But I haven't been extremely compelled to do much more work because I have the story. Every time I go back and try to, okay, maybe I should look into this thing because maybe I missed something there. And then I'll do like, read a few books and, poke around, get PDFs and do my regular research thing. And every time I've come up with, no, it's all, you already have everything in the book, everything that can be known at this point. I'm hoping that
it's an incredibly compelling book. I mean, you are able to prove these programs happen. You're able to provide primary sources. You're able to find the scientists who make the arguments for doing this work. But I think that leaves us all with, what do we do now? I mean, Tennessee banned them. Florida looks like they're on track to ban them as well.
There's a whole bunch of states. I haven't checked in recently on that website, but I think it's Americans for a Clean Atmosphere, I think is the website.com.
Okay.
And you just go there. Don't quote me on that. You can try it. I've forgotten. I did the article a while ago. I did a whole piece on that in the James Corbett interview that I did in July of last year. That was the last big interview I did. But they, you go to their homepage, and on their homepage, they tell you every state. They say, this state's doing this state's doing that. The last time I checked, it was like 15 states either have already passed bills or are working on bills. Actually, I think Tennessee is the only one that's passed. These state legislatures are out of session right now. I think they're coming back into session pretty soon, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's in the spring or something. But most state legislatures are part-time. California is one of the exceptions with a full-time state legislature. And but there's going to be a whole bunch of these type of bills that, like the bill that has already passed in Tennessee, there's going to be a whole bunch of them coming up in the next legislative session.
Good.
And then there's another website that I'm not supposed to mention, where apparently because I did a little thing. Oh yeah, because what happened was I was talking about these people, these activists pushing these bills through these state legislatures, and for some reason they come back to me like, we don't want to be associated with Peter Kirby. He does clickbait and all this stuff. I'm like, are you looking at the same work that I'm looking at? Because I'm doing like deep research here, and like, I've probably dropped about 10 different bombshells on this thing, uncovering, just digging out of all this mountain of information, things that are extremely pertinent to what's going on here. It's very strange to me, but I'm still going to promote their work, even though apparently they don't like me. I mean, because I think they're doing good work from what I can tell. They're raising awareness and they're pushing these bills through the state. I wish they wouldn't, treat me the way they do, but that's what they choose to do. I mean, me and Corbett, we gave him a whole bunch of exposure. I mean, after we did that interview, there was like, we got probably at least 100,000 views on that thing overall. He has a lot of different platforms that he puts it on and whatnot. And I would bet dollars to donuts they had all kinds of people clicking on that button that says get involved. Americans for a Clean Atmosphere, yeah. And they probably had all kinds of money coming in, all kinds of volunteers and all this. I'm like, we don't want that. What are you doing this for then?
Well, it's interesting, that's your experience, and I think that it can be used in some ways as indication that maybe this is something they don't want to turn into a bit, that everyone involved is kind of like, let's just put it to bed. We can ban these things from happening over our state, but let's not bring too much attention to it, which is what we found also in our research, was that it was really, really hard to identify how that bill in Tennessee got through it. And I think that it's intentional that the folks involved don't necessarily want the attention. And, that being said, I think that's fine, right? That's totally fine.
As long as they continue to do a good job.
As long as they continue to do a good job, that's fine. But there's this other piece of, there are people suffering right now especially here in the state of California. I just saw it in Mexico too. They're spraying like crazy in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
There's other places that could benefit from having that kind of pressure on the government, and people want to know. I mean, this is one of the topics that I find to be of ubiquitous concern. No matter who you are or what your background is or what your education is or what you do for a living,
yeah,
you see them up there, you know it's happening,
yeah,
and it doesn't feel right, and you didn't consent to it, and it's changing weather patterns.
I grew up in Brisbane, which is borders San Francisco to the south on the eastern side of the peninsula. And I drove a cab. I've lived in the city for long periods of time, and I drove a cab in the city of San Francisco for like 20 years and stuff. So I was all over the city, and by going all over the city, I came to understand that the Sunset District of San Francisco historically really literally had about 7 to 10 sunny days per year. Per year. And I've lived in the Richmond district, which is right on the other side of the Golden Gate Park, which is basically the same story. And now it's sunny almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's that? And then they have this grand excuse. Well, that's climate change.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's not climate change. They've destroyed the marine layer
mm-hmm.
with the spraying is what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
And they've the atmospheric moisture. They've sequestered the atmospheric moisture. They take it out of these particles that they spray. It dries out the atmosphere wherever they spray it. The particles collect the atmospheric moisture on the particle.
Mm-hmm.
Once it's on the particle, it can't coalesce into rain. And that's why sometimes it's like foggy, but then it feels like you're getting hit with little like spiky things all over you. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like fog. Like fog is more like sort of smooth and like caressing, and you might have a little bit of moisture on there, but it feels like you're being hit with little pieces of sand or something. You know what I mean? I noticed that a long time ago, and it's particulate matter.
Mm-hmm.
And the atmospheric water is glommed onto these little pieces of particulate matter, and that's what you feel, and that's what happened to the fog in the Sunset District. So yeah, I mean, it's horrible. What do you think that does to an environment that's used to having this marine layer on it?
It dries out, and it dries out the vegetation eventually. You know, I wonder, our redwoods all along the California coast, we're losing so many of them.
No, the forests are just dying everywhere.
The forests are dying.
Yeah.
Is it related to
Oh, absolutely.
the fact that
absolutely
our precipitation patterns are getting messed up from all of this cloud seeding?
Yes. Marvin Herndon has written extensively about this, published journal articles, and there's quite a few things that are causing the death of these plants. First of all, they don't have the environment, the natural environment that they've had for forever, you know, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years. And so just that right there is enough to hurt plants. And then, the stuff that's coming down upon the plants is toxic. This is a toxic byproduct of the coal-fired power plant industry, coal fly ash. And then that gets down into the soil and contaminates the soil and weakens the trees. And then the bark beetles come in. Then the bark beetles. It's not just like bark beetles just happened all of a sudden. They're like, oh, the trees are dying because of bark beetles. Well, how did the bark beetles get there? It's because the trees are weakened. They're in a weakened state.
Yeah.
If they were strong,
it's kind of like parasites in a human body.
The bark beetles would not have, they wouldn't be able to consume the tree in the way that they do. But the bark beetles eat away at the tree. Once the tree is infested with bark beetles, it's done. And then that's why all the wildfires happen, because you have all these trees that are just all hollowed out. They're dried out. They're basically dead if they're not fallen over already. And so it's just all fuel for the fire. You know, a healthy tree, it's a lot harder to burn a healthy tree than it is a dead tree.
Yeah. I've seen it with my own eyes. I have properties in Malibu. And, the ones that survive have a very different profile than the ones that don't survive.
Oh, and then the other thing is that stuff that they spray acts as an incendiary. It's got heavy metals in it, like aluminum, barium, strontium. And
conduct.
well, it's almost akin to a thermitic reaction. That's I believe I was watching. I keep on referencing that show. People should go back and watch it. The most recent interview with Dane Wigington and Mike Adams. They were talking about how aluminum is one of the main ingredients, if not the main ingredient, in thermite. Thermite is what they use to bring down buildings. It's a very intense, high temperature chemical reaction that basically dissolves anything, and not only that, so that you have this powder, this material that's just this dust that's everywhere. It settles on all the trees everywhere. So you're basically, it's an incendiary that's been scattered over the entire region, over the entire country.
Mm-hmm.
These plants are dead, and they've been coated in an incendiary.
Mm-hmm.
It's the root cause of it is the chemtrails. I mean, not only, it doesn't even have to be something like a thermite reaction. Pretty much anything, if it's in a powdered form, a dustified form, and is floating around in the atmosphere, can ignite.
Mm-hmm.
If you have like a grain silo that's mostly empty, maybe some grain in the bottom, there's still a lot of grain particles floating around, especially if you go in there and start stirring it up. And you don't want to be in there and lighting a lighter, because if you do that, the whole thing is going to blow. You've seen probably grain silos. Sometimes they're blown out because a spark, or maybe they ran into it with the tractor or something, caused a spark, and the whole thing just blew. And so there's any type of particulate matter, if there's enough of it in the right concentration, is going to be something that's incendiary. So soybeans can be incendiary, corn can be incendiary. But then when you're talking about heavy metals, I mean, you're talking about serious incendiaries.
I mean, one, it defeats the popular narrative around climate change, because there's clearly weather engineering going on by humans. So if they want to make the claim that climate change is man-made,
it's so diabolical. It is man-made. It's not atmospheric CO2.
Yeah, the government or its contractors or some rogue organization.
Yeah, they're menacing the public
responsible
with it.
for it.
Yeah,
and I don't think that this is so hard for many Americans to now admit to it happening, because if you went through COVID-19 and saw how disingenuous these government organizations were towards the American public and the amount of harm they inflicted upon the American public, it makes you understand then that the climate change narrative just might also be something that is not true, that is being distorted and turned. It's being turned on the American people.
Well, yeah, I mean, you see what they did with COVID. I mean, they're just lying, straight lying to everybody. I mean, all the monkeys died in the trials, right? I mean, the COVID virus has always been classified as a cold and flu virus with a 3% death rate, 1% death rate, I think it is, which is, common for every year. This is what it's always been classified as. And yet they just make this big deal about it in the news and stuff. There's many points that you can make pertaining to COVID where they just straight up lied. And millions of people died. Millions of people died.
There's two topics that liberals have a hard time with, right? They will say, yeah, COVID-19 wasn't handled well, and that mRNA vaccine wasn't as good as they said it was, and yeah, Biden just pardoned his entire family and Fauci on his last day in office, and Kamala Harris really misappropriated a lot of election
They just
funds.
don't care. They're going for broke.
But liberals still will be like, I believe in climate change, and I believe that abortion is my absolute right, and that right-wingers are trying to take abortion away from me. And those are the two things that are the last to let go of. And when I say let go of, I'm not saying don't let go of your
I don't
bodily
think you've been
autonomy.
to
Like,
Marin County
don't
lately.
fall into the narrative that you think that the right wingers believe
There's
in.
a lot more than that.
Yeah, but like, climate change is a really hard one for people to get over. And if you're a climate change denier, and I think we flip this back on them with a new narrative, that I am not a climate change denier. In fact, I also agree that man-made climate change is real. But the people doing the climate change are not the people you think. It's not the you and me driving to and from
The
work.
CIA finds ways to muddy the water and make everything so convoluted that most people just don't understand what's going on here. And that's the point of what they're doing.
Most people can't wrap their head around how diabolical the situation is.
I mean,
Most
yeah.
people cannot believe that such evil could exist.
Well, if Satanists are in charge, then everything makes sense, right?
You know, I was just in El Salvador a few months ago, meeting with the president and leaders of his government. And Satanists are also something hard to digest. If you're just a regular average person, like if I go to my mom and I'm like, Mom, they're Satanists and they're in government, they're powerful Satanists in this world. My mom is like, you need to get some sleep right now. And
my mom's the same.
yeah, you need to calm down. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. I'll calm down. And then, and then you talk to the people in El Salvador that locked up a literal Satanist gang that originated here in the United States. We deported them back to El Salvador. But this is a very big and powerful satanic group that would chop bodies up into parts and ship them to family members.
Yeah, I think I read about that.
Right? Like this is horror. Some of the stories I heard were deeply troubling and disgusting and horrendous and terrifying. And they would go, and as they did these raids in El Salvador on these gangs, they actually went into their satanic temples and discovered these massively elaborate satanic temples. And I hear these stories from like the top government officials who saw these things, who had to deal and clean these things up, like literally clean them up, throw these people in prison, deal with the ramifications for which many families paid big prices to fight that evil. And when you realize that it's real, that this stuff exists in the world, and that it's
kind of understandable in a way because, when you go out into the world and start doing things and you want to accomplish things and, do good things and be a good person and bring light and love into the world, such as you and I have both been doing for a long time now, you see all this resistance and you see how incredibly difficult it is to, just try to rectify things that are wrong. And so other people have that experience that they might not be actively trying to be so wonderful and good about everything. They might just trying to be living their lives, but, and people just get squashed. People's lives just get ruined. They've done nothing wrong. Right. It's sort of understandable that somebody who just gets run over by the system might be like, okay, F you. I'm going to be the most evil person that you could possibly imagine. But I think it actually even goes back further than that. It happens in their childhood, where it's like this cycle where they're, abused as children, sexually abused, physically abused. And, you could totally understand how that would just totally screw somebody's head on backwards and just send them out into the world with just a vengeance and just, trying to just destroy as much as everything as possible. And it's just this sickness in our society where an average person living by common means really doesn't have very good chance to really accomplish anything in life. And that's a shame, because I think a lot of people have a lot of things to offer. I mean, you're looking at somebody who's been squashed by what I call the satanic establishment. I mean, all I was trying to do was not be sprayed. I mean, that's my number one thing. I'd like to have a career in media, and of course that was squashed, but I kept on doing it because my bottom line was, believe it or not, all my haters out there, believe it or not, my bottom line is actually trying to stop the spraying, is actually trying to have a healthy world where because I know I can't be happy unless everybody around me is happy. You know what I mean? I can't prosper unless the environment is prospering. And so, yeah, I mean, you start just kind of looking at the world and the way it is, and from your own experience, and just realizing how messed up it is. And, it does make a lot of sense that there would be a lot of people who turn to really dark energies to try to rectify that in some way. Or, but they don't, I don't know if they realize that they're actually perpetuating that whole cycle, or if they care at a certain point, or what. I guess they just don't care.
Well, let's help people have language and talking about the geoengineering that's occurring today. We have to be aware of the fact that using the word chemtrail is flagged. It will be diminished, right? Like the experts.
But I've been searching for the search results on that term since the beginning, because it's the colloquial term.
It is the colloquial term.
People don't know. Most people, or there's more people who have heard of the term chemtrail than geoengineering.
Yes. Weather modification is another one. Another term that's commonly used in the trade is cloud seeding and cloud harvesting.
I'm unfamiliar with cloud harvesting.
Yeah, cloud harvesting. That would be the rain portion of it. You seed it, and then you harvest it.
Yeah, but I don't know if they can make it. Well, they can make it rain with silver iodide, what I call the conventional weather modification industry. I would assume that with what I call the New Manhattan Project, where they're using electromagnetic energy as part of it, I would assume that they could make things rain out at a certain point as well. I don't know. Like I said earlier, the details of their operations are unknown to us. Only a few things we're sure that they can do.
The electromagnetic piece, I think, is a really important one. I have publicly talked about electromagnetic pollution, because we as humans are electromagnetic. We're an electrochemical species. It's just the nature of life, is that we our mitochondria are like little battery cells, battery packs in each of our cells. And we conduct against our environment, and we live in a natural electromagnetic field. There's a North Pole and a South Pole, magnets, and it keeps everything on our planet moving and rotating according to a very well-designed, beautiful,
just like an atom continuously moves.
Yes, it's a really beautiful thing that we get to experience as humans. And when you start to meddle with that field, our cells react. And the same with the planet's magnetic field. When you start to meddle with it, it will react. That's why weather modification works. And so what you've discovered is that, so they're adding particulate to our atmosphere, and then they're able to then react that particulate matter based on ground sources of energy.
And probably in space.
And space.
Satellites.
So what have you found? What does that look like?
Well, that whole aspect of it is the most mysterious part. And I thank God that Jenny Silcox contacted me one day. She's an expert in the field of electromagnetic energy, and she's a career scientist, and she's the science editor of my book. Without her, the the book wouldn't have been half as good, I don't think, because she kept all the science correct. And yeah, I mean, it's one of the most complex areas of science, period, if not the most complex. And
Well,
yeah,
we see it pop up in medicine, and I think it's very exciting to see it in medicine and
oh, there's so many
therapeutics,
applications. Yeah,
diagnostics.
it could be used. There's already known ways of using electromagnetic energy to heal people. It's already known. Jenny has
I'm most
one of these
excited
devices, I
about
think.
that. Yeah. I've actually just started studying biomagnetic pairs, which has been Dr. Garcia's work. I don't know if you've come across him, but
Mm-mm.
it's been really exciting to see that. But how does ground or satellite, like, what are they trying to do? Increase the energy, the biometric energy, or
Well, there's all kinds of stuff they can do. I mean, there's the manipulation of the atmospheric particles, but then you can also use it for mind control over people. And this is something that I talk about in the other agendas chapter of my book.
well, Tom O'Neill found those papers too from MK Ultra using electromagnetic energy for.
Well, there's not a whole lot of documentation that I know about, but there was one example of the CIA using electromagnetic energy to influence people's moods and thoughts over a large region. It was called Operation Peak, Pique. And I've searched extensively for more information on Operation Peak, and I keep on coming up empty. But they can hit us with mind control signals from thousands of miles away. They can hit a region. I know they can hit a region. Maybe they can hit even individuals with more accuracy. So they can hit individuals from Alaska, from the HARP thing, and the high frequency active auroral research project HARP in Gakona, Alaska. It was the largest ionospheric heater in the world, and these things produce directed energy that they bounce the directed energy off of the ionosphere. And so if the ionosphere is way out there in space, it's above the troposphere, above the stratosphere. I think it's the next one up, but it's high up in the atmosphere, and they can they can make a signal. Which camera am I looking at? They can make a signal here at HARP, shoot it up, bounce it off the ionosphere, and make it come down way over here almost on the other side of the planet. But not only that, these ionospheric heaters, they definitely can produce electromagnetic energy mind control signals. Not only that, they can make it go all the way around the world because they put it in something called Whistler mode, where it bounces off the ionosphere and then bounces again and again and again and again, and then hits the target, literally on the other side of the world. Not only that, they can bounce a signal off the ionosphere, a mind control signal or whatever signal they want, have it come down and hit the target, and then bounce it off of the target so that it goes back on the same path that it came from, and then bounces off the ionosphere and back to the original place where it originated from in the ionospheric heater. So there's so many things that they can do with these devices.
Is that just like a radio wave? It's like a more
it's a
efficient
radio
way
wave.
to move a radio wave?
It's a radio wave, yeah.
It actually is that efficient or less efficient? It's hard to say which
Well,
it
it
would be.
moves
I
at
mean,
the
it would
speed
be
of light.
much more efficient to just use a satellite.
Maybe. I mean, and I guess in different circumstances, they're going to want to use different things. They're also apparently using locally, they're using this NexRad system.
I've never heard of it.
Oh, it's, I think they call it Doppler radar. I'm not exactly clear on that. I think that's a synonym for a Doppler radar. That the weather radar they're always talking about on the TV news. Well, Doppler radar checking in here, making it sound all nice and helpful and everything. But apparently these NexRad stations, also known as Doppler radar, are the localized source of electromagnetic energy that's used to manipulate atmospheric particles and probably other things. So they have a whole range of things that they could use. And most notably would be the large scale facilities known as ionospheric heaters, and then the localized facilities known as NexRad, and then satellites. So, in different circumstances, they might want to use one or the other, or they might want to use all three of them together to create a big effect.
Scientifically, I think it's fascinating that humans have come up with so many interesting ways to move information through the environment. Telecommunications is, a big and a booming field, and a lot of innovation has come originally from the government. But, we've got to draw a line when we're experimenting, and when it is impacting and harming people's lives. And so if it's leading to drying of our redwood forest,
Yeah.
increasing fires and strengths of fires and the damage from fires, harming farmland, making our water system sick,
Ugh.
making our people sick.
It's known as full spectrum dominance.
That's not a good trade. That's not a good trade anymore.
It's in violation of the Nuremberg Code.
It's 100% in violation of the Nuremberg Code. And so much of my work has resulted in us going back to the Nuremberg trials and trying to explain and remind people why that was so important and why that consensus was made for the sake of civilization and humanity.
There's federal law based on the Nuremberg Code.
Yes. We have bodies and bodies of laws, and these are very important laws to uphold.
It's just more crime without prosecution.
I agree. Well, what's next for you, Peter? What's your hope? Like, where do you want this work to go? If there is a national ban on, it's hard to call it geoengineering because we want atmospheric spraying. Or how would you like it regulated? Would you like it regulated, or would you like a full ban on it?
A full ban. I think that, first of all, my bottom line on it is shut down the programs, stop the spraying. Secondly, the people who have been doing it need to be punished. And I think that you need a grand jury with subpoena power. You might need, I don't know how all that works. You're a lawyer, you might know more about that. I guess I'm under the impression that you get a special prosecutor, and then that special prosecutor creates a grand jury. However, the machinations of it work. We need subpoena power over private companies such as Halliburton, such as Raytheon, such as Dresser Industries, and so many others that I have documentation of them most probably being involved in these things. But they're companies that don't necessarily need to disclose this information. You could say they're public, you could say they're private, or whatever. I mean, it doesn't even really matter. But they're corporations that aren't going to voluntarily give up this information. You need to force them to come forward with this information, and then we can put all the pieces together and finally know everything that's going on. I think at this point we know everything that we can know at this point, between the work of Marvin Herndon and his cohort, Dr. Mark Whiteside, who's a sitting director of the Monroe County, Florida Department of Health. He's published like 20 papers with Marvin Herndon. Between those two and Jenny and Dane and myself, I think that we've all brought forward enough information so that any reasonable person is going to look at this and say, okay, there needs to be an official investigation here. You know what I mean? And I'm hoping RFK is that person.
Well, we've got some good people all over this next administration that are really serious about working on behalf of the American public to keep them safe from these programs. It was a Cold War era that kind of lifted any hesitation of the government to experiment on the American public. And so, we've got to put an end to that. We've got to close that chapter. Very dark chapter in American history. We've got to close it once and for all. We've got to move on. And look, if there's some cool new breakthrough in telecommunications that, are healthy and we can prove and limit the effects on biologic health, great. I think that's fine. I think it's fine to take innovations that come out of military research and make them available to the public in a safe way. But we're not there yet. And we're recovering from decades of abuse by our government.
Yeah, it's had everything to do with the CIA. It's had everything to do with the CIA. I mean, not only this, so many other things. But you just have this group that obviously doesn't give a crap about human life. Obviously just wants corporate rule. I mean, it's called industrial espionage, and we all pay for it. And, I mean, you look back at the history of the CIA. I've read many books on the CIA itself, but then you even look back further into the OSS, which was the predecessor to the CIA. It was headed by a guy named William Donovan. And it was just a clown show. I mean, he was like a very brash, colorful character himself, and he liked being the center of attention and all this. That's not what an intelligence agency should be. Okay, intelligence is a function of military. And that's where it should stay. Okay, you have like the CIA is known as a private, I think they call it a private intelligence agency. And, that's when you open Pandora's box. That's when all the rules are just thrown out the window because everything is a matter of national security. Like the growth of this corporation is a matter of national security. I mean, they just say everything's a matter of national security and just do whatever they want. It's the United States military that really knows what's a matter of national security.
There's no accountability. I mean, I am still, I think often of the stories of the MK Ultra subjects that had done had horrible things happen to them, did horrible things under the program. And I think about how deeply evil that is and how the fact that everyone involved got away with it. That's the piece. And that everyone involved didn't seem to think it was problematic what they had done to these innocent lives. I mean, that is beyond acceptable. So again, I really do hope, and I do think we can close this dark, dark chapter in American history. Once and for all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the good news is that also, if you look back at the history of the CIA and the OSS, there was a contingent of people in the American military that didn't want any part of it. Joe Stilwell was one of them. There were some other names that I've been reading. I read about in the most recent book that I've read about the OSS. And there was a whole contingent of very powerful people in the American military that actively fought against the growth of this private intelligence agency. And I think that the descendants or, the people, that there's been a continuing line of resistance within the American military to the CIA. If you just look at it on the surface, you think the CIA just runs everything and, they don't have any resistance. But there's been plenty of resistance there. And I think that resistance largely has produced the Trump phenomenon. This deep vein of real Americanism and, a real love of liberty has produced what now we see
MAGA.
It's MAGA. MAGA, yeah.
Yeah. And MAGA is just the place where us crunchy moms found a home that are, sick of this stuff. A lot of us just work really hard. The modern mom, we're expected to do it all. We're expected to have these great careers and all these degrees and look great and raise great, healthy kids. And it's like, we're trying our best, but we cannot be successful in a world like this.
Yeah, I mean, there's too many people.
Or they're spraying toxins over us into our food.
Yeah, the whole structure of the family has been obliterated because of all this nonsense that we've had to endure for this long.
Yeah.
I think it's much more healthy. I mean, call me call me a bad name, but I truly think that, a good way to have a healthy society is to have a man who goes out into the world and does stuff and makes money and provides for his family. I mean, being a mother is a full-time job.
Oh, being a mother is a full-time job. And I think that the point that what women want is the option, right? Women want the option. But again, it's doable if we were living in a normal society of honor, right? If we lived in an honorable society
Don't preclude
where our
them from it.
government was not hurting us in so many different aspects of life, whether it be through mandates on vaccines without screening or without concern, over prescription of antibiotics, which is a problem, poisons in our food.
Most mothers want to be mothers. It's called the mothering
poison
instinct.
in our water. Women, this whole fixation on conservatism and versus liberalism, it's such irrelevant BS when you look at what we are all dealing with on a day-to-day basis in this mass, irreconcilable, diabolical government overreach that is literally like in small bits here and there poisoning us, our water, our air, our food, our medications. And these are changes that can be made. There are things that can be done
it's a whole process.
Very, very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I went through that whole process too of eliminating all these different things out of my diet and out of the things that I encountered through my daily life. As I woke up in about 2009. So it's been quite a while. And it was a whole process of saying, hold on a second, that's killing me. You know what I mean? I realize now that that's killing me. I got to cut that out. You know what I mean? But if you don't realize that, it just crashes on top of you and destroys your health.
They just published something, I think, it was Bloomberg or was it Forbes, but new data on cancer rates, on how women of childbearing age have now surpassed men in cancer. And it's childbearing women are getting these explosive cancers. And they are suffering. These are painful,
I don't think you can actually point to one particular thing. It's a whole range of things that we're being exposed to.
Oh, yeah. And that's why there's such a diversity of these
vaccines
cancers.
Are probably at the top of the list.
Well, I mean, that will go, that's directly into your body. They're finding residual.
And you're getting something injected into your body. I mean, your body actually has mechanisms to deal with particulate matter.
Well, your lungs and you got you can sweat some of it.
Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad for us to be being sprayed. It's incredibly bad. But when you're injecting things into your body, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's either a fast toxicity or it's a slower toxicity, but they're both toxic and they're both incredibly harmful, and it ruins lives. It ruins entire family lineages are coming to an end. This is what I keep trying to show people statistically, is how many family lineages between the baby boomers and millennials are coming to an end with that millennial.
And then meanwhile, it's been these politicians up on stage like it's, some big celebrity event or something, like it's a big circus, and they're just like, yay, and all this, and fireworks are going off. And, I mean, and I know that you've been a part of that a little bit, only a little bit.
A little bit.
But it's necessary in today's politics. Trump does it. I support Trump.
Look, if I have a great speech
it's not
that I
really
want to deliver.
What we want long term.
Yeah. If there's a great speech I want to deliver with some great information that I think the public is ready for, I don't care. I'll get out on that stage. I'll go on Fox News.
It's necessary right now.
I'll go on CNN.
Because we need to counter what they've been doing. I mean, basically the CIA, or you could say the establishment, whatever, they've created this whole idea where politicians are personalities, where politicians are like movie stars and actors and, sports people and all this kind of stuff. They all kind of lump them all into one group. These are celebrities, don't you know? I mean, I'd like to see government extremely boring.
Oh, they're my favorite. I actually think the real rock stars in government are like the Thomas Masseys. I love Senator Ron Johnson. I think is fantastic.
There's something to
Ron
do
Paul is one of my favorites.
Yeah. I mean, they have red meat that they can play with at this point because the other side is producing it. You have to meet what they're doing with, something that's forceful of your own at this point in time. But I think long term, what we really want as a society is just government just in the background as an operating system.
We want it small.
Yeah. That you don't even really think about. It just works.
Can't do the amount of harm that a big government can do. Right. And that's why I'm like, this isn't about conspiracy. This is just about the reality of what happens when you have an overinflated government. And Senator Ron Johnson said it beautifully when I asked him straight up. I looked at him straight through the screen and I said, okay, what is the deep state? Tell me, what's the deep state? And he's like, the deep state is the corruption that happens when the government is too big. It's as simple as that. There's not some, maybe there are some underground groups, but like the reason why the deep state is so successful and able to create such chaos, right? And unchecked chaos is because it's so big.
It feeds on itself. And it started with FDR in America. At a time of crisis, just like a demon came in and feasted on America. You know what I mean? When America was weakened, in came the deep state, in came the government Leviathan,
Yeah. Or that critter that eats the redwoods.
The bark beetles.
The bark beetle.
Exactly.
The deep state is basically the bark beetle.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think we've made the full circle.
You started at one point asking about the language, geoengineering, chemtrails, all the different things.
Yeah.
Like, how is it so that chemtrails are totally fake? David Keith, chemtrails, conspiracy theory. But geoengineering is real. Like, what is that?
Well, they're just playing word games. They're just playing semantics. They're trying to control the conversation.
Right.
And I won't let them do it.
Right.
They're trying to say like, no, these are the parameters of the debate. I'm going to set them, and you must abide by them.
Well, you're not allowed a seat at the table unless you use the right colloquialisms, right? It's a very classist.
Yeah, I mentioned in my book that he says he doesn't know what the word chemtrail means, which is complete bull. Of course, he knows what the word chemtrail means. But he's just trying to make his little power play because that's what he's all about.
So let's define. So chemtrail is the spraying of anything in the atmosphere.
Well, it's an amalgamation of the words chemical and trail. So there's chemicals coming out, and it's an adulterated exhaust coming from a jet plane.
The establishment considers the word chemtrail pejorative for their very important geoengineering work.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm offending them.
And one more question is, after the fires are all happening in California, many people who believe in, informed consent in the medical freedom community, politicians are saying, okay, now, do cloud seeding to make it rain in California. Can you, just tell a story about why that's horribly misguided?
Well, silver iodide is toxic. That's what they use in the conventional cloud seeding industry. The above board permitted operations known as cloud seeding. So, in certain circumstances, actually, I think these kinds of programs might be a good idea. If you can make it rain when there's a huge fire burning down a vast urban area, maybe you might want to endure a little bit of toxicity if you can put the fires out. You know what I mean?
It might be less than the fire retardant, that red fire retardant powder that they spray on everything.
That looked like some other scam. It's like, okay, either your house burns down or it gets contaminated with all this chemical pink stuff.
PFAS.
It was.
Yeah.
Right. So can they even make it rain that efficiently? That's another question.
Well, first you need the atmospheric conditions need to be right. You can't just have like a clear sky and then, spray silver iodide and all of a sudden it starts raining. You have to have cumulus clouds at first. Sometimes cumulus clouds those are rain clouds. Sometimes they'll just pass over things and not rain. But if you want a certain area to receive rain and, cumulus clouds are coming in, you can make that cumulus cloud deposit rain on a certain area with the conventional cloud seeding industry. That's why they do it over ski resorts. Or
they do it in Mammoth.
They use ground-based generators. There's two different ways of doing the silver iodide. They do it from ground-based generators, which is a lot cheaper, and then sometimes they'll spray it out of planes.
Do you think that the states legislating against chemtrails actually means that they'll stop spraying in those states? Like, are corporations bound to listen to that?
I don't know.
Does that mean municipality? Like, in some of our research, we discovered that Santa Barbara, for example, county pays, $1 million a year to cloud seed, right? So, but who's paying,
Water districts.
Water districts are paying for it.
That's traditionally who's been paying for it specifically. But then power generators have been paying for it as well, like PG&E in Southern California Edison. I get into that in the book. They've been doing that forever because it fills up the reservoirs with the hydroelectric reservoirs where they can generate hydroelectric power. So there's a whole lot of reasons why governments would want to do this.
And why don't we as citizens have like any right to say yes or no to that? Like, you can't come on my land.
We should. We should have a right. They've just been doing it. They've just been going, just like the cloud seeders do, just like, they've been back in the day when they first started, like I outlined in the book, the scientific era of weather modification. One I think I forget or neglected to make this point very clearly in the book was that when they had the big press explosion, I've made this point in other interviews, but when they had the big press explosion about, oh, look, these GE scientists made it rain, by spraying something out of a plane, they used dry ice. So that's innocuous in the environment, right? In fact, it's carbon dioxide is what it is.
Yeah.
And so that was the big press explosion around that. Look, they used dry ice and made it rain. Dry ice, dry ice, dry ice. A month later, they're using silver iodide. No press. See how they snuck that in?
Yeah.
Like the big public interest had already blown over. And then they start spraying you with the toxic stuff. And then they just start doing, putting a state by state basis, issuing permits for people to engage in this activity all across, mostly in the West.
And then one more from Evergreen Corporation.
Evergreen Aviation.
Evergreen Aviation was something that you've talked about. It's in Dr. Fred Bell's book also.
It was a CIA cutout.
It's a CIA.
Evergreen Aviation was the CIA.
Well, I'm asserting that right here, kind of off record. I guess I don't really assert that outright in the book. I just lay out, what I have from the documentation. But I mean, it looks for all the world like a CIA cutout. I mean, all the old proprietary airlines of the CIA got fed into Evergreen Aviation. You think the CIA is just going to let all that go and just sell it all off when they had the New Manhattan Project in the works? I don't think so.
Interesting.
They had CIA proprietary airlines, if you didn't know. I'd go on about it at length in the book. It's in the chemtrail fleet chapter.
Yeah.
I mean, the CIA was the largest operator of clandestinely operating aircraft lines. Or actually, they were the collectively what was known as Air America was a bunch of different airlines all owned by the CIA under something called the Pacific Corporation. And collectively, at one point in history, all of those airlines were bigger than any other airline in the world.
Wow.
The story you tell about the guy outside making coffee, like there's a story in the book where like the wife is making coffee and comes outside and is like, honey, you got to look at this.
Yeah, that was from William Thomas's book, Chemtrails Confirmed, 2004. That's another good read. But those were some really great documentations of early examples of large-scale spraying. And that's his book is why I'm able to place the beginning of the large-scale spraying operations at 1996 is because of William Thomas's book and the legwork that he did. Because people have actual common sense, and they're just like, chilling in their house one day and all of a sudden, there's like 20 planes flying over and just making a tic-tac-toe grid out of the sky. It's like, I'm not supposed to notice this?
But they make us feel crazy. They definitely tell us it's not happening.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest problems. It's this presumption that the average person is so powerless that you can do whatever you want to them. That's the presumption.
Yeah.
And that's really, really sad and pathetic. And I've seen it. I've seen that presumption.
That's the elitist point of view.
That is the elitist. I've been around these
Right,
people.
exactly. The transhumanists.
I mean, they are true narcissists. They have complete disregard for the common person. They find they have no patience for the common person. Their entire existence is around how powerful and influential they are. That's their existence.
Yeah.
And you could see how, if you're a spiritual person and you're witnessing these individuals conducting themselves, and it's very clear that these are godless people. Because that's the only way to validate.
Well, they may have a God, but it's not our God.
That's a good point.
You know, like you hear Lloyd Blankfein, we're doing God's work. You know, I guess that depends on who your God is. Because, I mean, if you're worshiping Satan, yeah, then you're doing God's work.
Yeah.
Yeah, if your God is Satan.
Right. Well, thank you very much for your time. And I will, I think even just on behalf of the farmers, I want this to stop. I've got to make the spraying stop immediately. So thanks for all the work you have done to get us to this moment.